The Great Giana Sisters, released in 1987, is a bit of an unusual game. It didn't really do anything new with the platform genre, however it did give C64 users a gaming experience they would not have gotten unless they bought an NES with a copy of Super Mario Bros. Yes, the Great Giana Sisters was indeed a Mario clone. Had this game not started out life as a Mario clone, it would have surely drifted into gaming obscurity, but because of the legal action taken by Nintendo, this game was immediately taken off of store shelves and went underground, where it soon became one of the most copied and shared games of the C64 era. Years after this game's controversy, a small loyal fan following kept this game alive with unofficial sequels and numerous other fan-made games. Thanks to the efforts of this community to show that there was still an audience for more Giana Sister games, an official remake was finally made in 2009 and followed by a crowdsourced sequel in 2012. This has to be one of the most unusual gaming series of all time I've ever had the privilege of reviewing, and so I present the Great Giana Sisters Series review. Games come and go, it's a fact of life, and the only reason some are remembered while others are forgotten is usually because of some form of controversy. Remember when Universal tried to sue Nintendo because they thought Donkey Kong infringed on King Kong? Of course, Universal didn't even own the rights to King Kong. Or how about this? Would there still be more combat games today without the squabble over the violence and blood of the first game? Or what about Tomb Raider and how Lara Croft was used as a sex symbol to simply sell them games? And as we all know, women the world over took offence at how this game portrayed them, which in the end only equated to game sales. These games and many others are only remembered because some took issue or offence at them, and while time looks on them favourably now, it took another series almost 20 years to get its just desserts and to be considered more than just a Mario clone. Yes, I'm talking about the Great Giana Sisters, so let's start at the beginning with the first game in this series. First thing, let's address the big white elephant in the room. For better or for worse, this game did start out life as a Mario clone. From the colour of the sky to the overall look of the first few levels, you can clearly tell this game was originally designed to look and play like a Super Mario Bros. Game, but obviously running on a Commodore 64. Once you get past all that, you can see this game for what it is, a solid platformer for its time. And that's not to say this game is a complete Mario clone, as once you get into the later levels, this game really starts to come into its own, with some very wacky level design that sets it very much apart from Mario. And not forgetting the music, which also helps give this game its own identity. The few tunes created by Chris Husbeck are some of the best C64 music I've heard on this system. Chris Husbeck's music gives this game a completely different flavour and also sets it apart from Mario, which this game very much needs to do. The music to Super Mario Bros. Has a happy-go-lucky vibe to it, while Giana Sisters on the other hand comes off a bit more dreamy and mysterious. When you compare these games musically, they're completely different games. The one thing this game sure doesn't have in common with Mario is the timer. In Mario you have 400 seconds to get through each level, and that's more than enough time. Heck, you're more likely to die than run out of time. In Giana Sisters on the other hand, you have 100 seconds to get through each level, and this puts you in a bit of a dilemma. Do you try to complete this game in one sitting with just 3 lives and avoid collecting gems? Or do you try to collect as many gems as you can to gain extra lives while risking running out of time, and if you run out of time you lose a life, so what do you do? I felt that only having 100 seconds to finish each level was a bit of a misstep, as it makes this game for some players a bit too hard. But on the other hand, the cult following for the Great Giana Sisters loved that this game was as hard as nails. So each to their own, I guess. But the one thing we can all agree upon is the controls in this are as good as those in Super Mario Bros. If you're going to copy another game, at least make sure the controls in it are as good as the game you're trying to copy, and the Great Giana Sisters does just that. But there is something else besides controls that sets this game apart from Mario, and that is the power-ups. As we all know in Mario, you collect mushrooms to become big, fire flowers to shoot fireballs, and stars to make you temporarily invincible. The power-ups in Giana Sisters were obviously inspired by those in Super Mario Bros, but this game does its own take on them. Instead of mushrooms, we have a fire wheel, and that turns cute Giana into punk Giana, and turned into punk Giana allows her to smash boxes with her head. Instead of a fire flower, we have lightning, and that allows Giana to shoot lightning, and collecting double lightning makes Giana's lightning bolts bounce around the levels. Also, strawberries give Giana the ability to home in on enemies with her lightning bolts. To make Giana an unstoppable force to be reckoned with, you need to collect these 4 items, and once you have them, this game is a lot easier, but don't get cocky or otherwise you have to start from scratch. And without these power-ups, this game can be rather tricky. There are other power-ups besides the ones I just mentioned, but let's leave some mystery to this game. Overall, this game is unquestionably a Super Mario Bros. Clone, but I don't think the Great Giana Sisters hurt Nintendo in any way, because any Commodore 64 owners who really wanted to play Super Mario Bros. Most likely got an NES with a copy of Mario. For some C64 users that was not an option, so they played the closest thing to a Mario game for their system, the Great Giana Sisters. Apart from this game looking and playing like Super Mario Bros, I can't find fault with it, apart from my little grumble about the timer of course. But that being said, this is a good game that in my eyes at least does enough to be considered its own thing, and while I have no nostalgia connection to this game, I still enjoyed it very much and highly recommend this game to other retro gamers who are looking for a new challenge. But before I talk about the next game in this series, it's time for a history lesson on why the Super Mario Bros. Clone was even made in the first place. Time Warp Productions had created a version of Super Mario Bros. Running on a Commodore 64 and had also begun porting this game to other computer systems. They contacted Nintendo and showed them what they had done in the hope of persuading Nintendo to license and let them release their version of Super Mario Bros. As you might have expected, Nintendo was simply not interested because this was an exclusive game for their console and computer ports were simply out of the question. What Time Warp Productions did may seem stupid now, but back then, the idea of a game being exclusive to a single system was alien to computer markets, and Time Warp Productions just saw an opportunity and thought Super Mario Bros. Being ported to computer systems made good business sense. Not wanting to waste their work, Time Warp Productions changed this game to remove all traces of Mario, and even changed the name to the Great Giana Sisters. Even before this game was released, it was getting a lot of positive attention and glowing pre-reviews from the gaming press, who hailed this game as the C64's Mario. In 1987, the Great Giana Sisters was finally released. But right after the release, Time Warp Productions was issued with a cease and desist from Nintendo to stop selling their game and to pull all remaining copies from store shelves. Time Warp Productions did not want the hassle or the legal cost of going to court to contest this injunction, so they just complied with all of Nintendo's requests, and that was the end of that matter. Why did Nintendo go after Time Warp Productions after they changed this game to avoid this from happening? Well, I don't think there's any one thing in particular, but maybe Time Warp Productions had just pushed their luck a little too far. What I finally think pushed Nintendo over the edge was the reference on the Great Giana Sisters game cover, "The Brothers Are History." Nintendo could have let this game go under the radar, but that reference on the game cover made it clear this game was at least a derivative of their intellectual property. Prior to this injunction, work had begun on a sequel called Giana 2, Arthur and Martha. But for fears of further legal action by Nintendo, this game was radically changed to a future setting under the new name Hard and Heavy, This game has no connection with the Great Giana Sisters, apart from maybe using the same game engine. But back to the Great Giana Sisters. This game came, and thanks to Nintendo, disappeared as soon as it arrived. But in its short time being sold, it left a lasting impression. This game became a sort of urban legend, with stories being told about its tragic history. And the few copies that did get sold were repeatedly copied and passed about among fellow Commodore 64 users. Years later, this game was still being played and talked about. Now, I don't think this game is one of the greatest games ever made, but I think a lot of its appeal has to do with its history, and that the game was the equivalent of digital forbidden fruit. And as much as people enjoyed playing this game, they wanted more, and so the fans of this cult classic delivered. Thanks to Professor Knibble and Sand, a Giana Sisters level editor was made. This editor would allow you to create levels for your very own hacked Giana Sisters game. The first of these types of games was Giana Sisters 2, and this hacked game was made by a group called New Waves. This game would feature 33 brand new levels and a grand loop mode where you can play a mix of the new and original levels. But there was a bug in level 32 that prevented you from getting past that level. Many of these types of games were made, and the last known one made in '93 but released in 2005 was called as well Giana Sisters 2. This fan-hack game was made by 7A3 and is considered to be the definitive fan-hack game. It fixes loads of issues with the original game and adds 40 new levels, as well as the ability to fly and swim. Originally this game was going to be sold, but due to legal reasons that was not possible, and so the game was shelved for over a decade until it was released for free on the internet. There are many more noteworthy fan-made games made for Flash and various other platforms, but it would take me forever to talk about them all, so let's leave it at this game as a cult following that's been making many fan games over the years. What these fan games have done above all else was prove there was still an audience for more Giana Sister games, and I don't know how he did it, but the creator of Giana Sisters, Armin Gizzards, had somehow come to a truce with Nintendo, and so the next game in the series would be on a Nintendo system, but of course without legal action. So let's talk about the next game in the series, Giana Sisters DS. Upon putting this game in your Nintendo DS, you will notice how much it pays tribute to the Great Giana Sisters. From the start, you will see that the in-game menu still retains that classic sprawling title sequence from the original, but with a new updated look to go along with the rest of the game. Giana Sisters DS could have just coasted on nostalgia alone, but instead it rebirths the original game for a new generation of retro gamers. I think this game might be the true realisation that Armin Gizzard had from the beginning when he redesigned his Mario clone into the Great Giana Sisters. Graphically, this game by Nintendo DS standards is simply amazing, and if you thought the previous game looked a bit like a Mario Bros clone, then get a load of its sequel. There is no way this game could ever be compared to Mario, as the art style is simply in a world of its own. There is just so much care and attention given to every pixel on the dual screens. Good graphics don't make a good game, and without good controls to go along with them, all this will be for nothing. So, what are the controls like? Well, the controls are tight and responsive, and that's a good thing because this game requires some serious precision control, and that's because of the level designs. What I like the most about them is how they constantly throw new challenges at you while preparing you for the next ones. They are tough, but I thought they were fair, so if you happen to die, you've only got yourself to blame and not poor level design or controls. Most of the time when I died, it was because I was trying to collect all the jewels. When you collect 100 of them, you gain extra life, but also if you collect all the red jewels, you gain a red flag instead of a blue one, and a red flag indicates that you've successfully fully completed a level. If you wanted to, you could probably complete this game in a few hours, but for completionists, it will take some time to fully complete this game. The inclusion of checkpoints at the beginning and midway through each level is a welcome addition over the original, and that means you don't have to complete this game in one sitting.
but if you do happen to lose all your lives, you do have to restart at the beginning of the last level you're on. Now I didn't mind that, as it sure beats having to restart the beginning of the game again like you did with the original, and that along with short levels makes this game more fun.
Now my stance on 2D platformers is keep the levels short, and if they're any more than a few minutes you risk the player getting bored, and the best way to avoid that is to create fun, challenging but short levels. I would say each levels in this game could easily be completed in about 1.5 to 2 minutes, and for me this was a sweet spot. I always got the feeling that I was progressing forward throughout this game, and that had a knock-on effect of making this game hard to put down, and that is thanks to the short but very fun levels. Another area where this game improves over the original is the power-ups. They've been reduced to just one, the fire wheel. Now it may seem like you're being cheated out of power-ups, but I found the lack of power-ups to help this game's pacing. Think about it, how much time did you spend in the original just collecting power-ups? With this game, once you collect the fire wheel, you've now got the ability to break boxes and shoot fireballs. And that's really all the power-ups Giana will ever need. This makes it clear to me that this game's focus was on level design and not on collecting lots of different power-ups just for the sake of it. There is however 2 items that you collect and use at will when the level requires you to, and they are bubblegum and cola. Bubblegum allows you to fly and cola allows you to break walls. I enjoyed using these items, but found using the touchscreen to access them to be just a tacked on touchscreen feature. And one last thing to mention, the soundtrack to this game is awesome. All your favourite tunes from the first game are here, but beautifully remixed with a whole load of new music. The new tunes fit in well with the classic ones, and they also help to fill out this game musically. What I mean by that is you don't have to hear the same tunes over and over again like you did with the first game, and that's another area where this game improves over the original.
Overall, Giana Sisters DS is an incredible game that improves on every aspect over the original, and if you did happen to miss out on the first game, then I would suggest you skip it and start right at the sequel. It's not that the sequel is a better game, but it's more welcoming for gamers who are more used to modern game mechanics. And another reason why I love this game is that it appeals to retro gamers as well as non-retro gamers. Now all left to talk about is the third game in this series, Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams. Before we talk about it, it's time for another history lesson.
Giana Sisters DS was released in Europe in 2009 and received mostly positive reviews. The few complaints from critics were that this game wasn't original or innovative. I personally think that this game wasn't trying to remake the original, but to bring it back and improve it. And besides, Spellbound Interactive had to stay true to the original source material, so what on earth were those critics expecting anyway? If those critics were expecting something new, they sure got it with Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams, but we'll get to the third game in the series in a bit. The saddest thing after Giana Sisters DS release was that Armin Guzard, the creator of the original game and the mastermind behind its sequel, died only a few months after this game came out. It is fitting that his 25-year-long career in the video game business ended with the series that started it. In his time he worked for Rainbow Arts, Blue Byte, and in '94 he founded Spellbound Entertainment, which would later be reformed into Black Forest Games. Armin Guzard made many games in his time, but outside of the Giana Sisters series, some of his most noted work was the Desperado games and the first title in the Airline Tycoon series. Armin Guzard was a talented man and his contributions to this industry will be sorely missed, but his beloved Giana Sisters series would live on. In 2010, an iOS port of Giana Sisters DS, renamed just Giana Sisters, was released. In its first month, it became the most downloaded game in Germany, Austria, Netherlands, and Norway. In 2011, Giana Sisters was given a limited release in America. Originally, there were no plans to give this game a stateside release, but given the amount of copies that were being imported to the US, there was demand and so it had to be satisfied. With the European sales and the limited US sales, I'm guessing this game was a success, and so the series was truly back and ready for future installments.
One more thing, and then I will talk about the third game in the series. Recently, Giana Sisters DS was ported to the Ouya. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail other than this game is redrawn in HD and looks amazing, but even after the first update, this game is still buggy as anything. I would suggest until the Ouya version is fixed, just stick to the DS version, but once the Ouya port's fixed, I would recommend it as I believe this could be a great way to play this game on the big screen, and it's also super cheap. Now let's move on to the third game in this series, Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams.
First thing, this game is friggin' gorgeous. Now, I've played a lot of independent games over the last few years, and this has to be one of the best looking ones out there. But these great graphics come at a price, and you'll need a capable PC to get the best looking Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams DirectX 10 experience. Even on my video editing rig, I still experience the odd bit of slowdown, but hopefully with future updates this issue will be fixed. I can't comment on the 360 or PS3 versions, but you do have the option to play this game on consoles. Unlike the two previous games in the series, Twisted Dreams takes a different approach. From the beginning you have access to both cute and punk Giana, and at a touch of a button you can change between them. Changing between them also changes this world from a dark place devoid of life, to a bright vibrant one filled with colour and wonder. This new gameplay feature of switching between Giana's personas comes at a price, and third time around there are no power-ups. But to be honest, I didn't mind that, and I never noticed until I was writing this review that the power-ups were missing.
I would suggest a good pair of headphones to go along with this game because the soundtrack is incredible. You've got half the soundtrack created by Chris Husbeck, the composer of the original game, along with Machine Supremacy's rendition of it.
When you change from cute Giana to punk Giana, the world along with the soundtrack changes as well. How Black Forest Games pulled this off was by having these two soundtracks playing at the same time. Chris Hosbeck's score is amazing and surreal with a dreamlike quality to it that captures the essence of the series. And Machine Supremacy's rendition of Chris's score is intense and so in your face. These two music scores are like fire and ice and surprisingly complement each other in a crazy beautiful symphony that invokes a rainbow of emotions. This game's soundtrack is available on Bandcamp and I highly recommend it. Before we really get started with Twisted Dreams, this might be a good time to talk about Maria. It's best to think of her as Giana's Luigi. This series is called Giana Sisters, so I've got to cover her, but there's not much to talk about. She's only ever playable in the first game, and isn't even mentioned in the second one. In the third game, she's only ever used as a plot device to set up the story. At the beginning of Twisted Dreams, Maria is swallowed by a giant dragon, and it's up to Giana to save her.
While being very simple, this is an effective story setup that doesn't over-explain itself. And what dooms most modern video games is over-explain the storyline and leaving nothing left for the player's imagination. And the same could be said for gameplay.
I hate it when a game forces on you a non-needed tutorial or holds your hand throughout the game. I'm happy to say that Giana Sisters Twisted Dreams avoids these common problems found with most modern video games. From the beginning you learn that you can change any time into cute and punk Giana at the touch of a button. Both sides to Giana have their ability. Punk Giana has a flame dash attack, and cute Giana can do a twirl that allows her to float in the air. You don't actually have to change into the right persona to use Giana's abilities. What I mean is, let's say you're cute Giana and you need to use your dash attack to break some blocks. You just use a dash attack, and while you're performing that move, Giana changes into punk Giana. The beauty of this is it simplifies everything, and you don't need to press two buttons when one will get the job done. But wait a minute, If using an ability changes Giana, then why would you ever need to manually change into cute or punk Giana? Well, there is a puzzle element to this game, and you have to constantly change Giana's personas to get through different parts of the levels. When you change Giana, hazards suddenly disappear in that way. The further you get through this game, the more challenging it becomes, and it will require some quick thinking on when to change Giana, and also changing Giana makes different gems appear and disappear, so you'll have to be pretty creative in working out how you're going to collect all them gems.
But as beautiful and amazing as this game is, I do have two complaints. They're not game breaking, but I would be doing this game and this series a disservice if I didn't talk about them.
The first problem is that Giana's too small. I mean, she's well animated, but she's too small for you to clearly see all her cute expressions. With the two previous games, this wasn't a problem because of the lower resolutions and lack of actual character animation. With Twisted Dreams in full high definition glory, Giana seems kinda lost in a super detailed world. Another issue is how this game introduces new gameplay mechanics. I did say earlier how I love that this game doesn't over-explain things, but there were a few times where I needed a little more direction than what I was given, and this game simply didn't provide it. It does give you signs to hint to what you're meant to do, but they were so vague that I had to resort to trial and error to work out what I was meant to do. I guess when you keep a game simple with the intention of things being intuitive, these problems are gonna happen. But apart from these two issues, I love this game to bits. It's a feast for the eyes and ears, and backed up with some interesting gameplay to boot. If after the future DLC there is ever a sequel, I'm there day one, but please address these two minor issues and you'll have the basis for a great sequel.
So my final thoughts. The Great Giana Sisters didn't have the greatest of starts, but after a long hiatus it came back with a vengeance, and that was thanks to the fans. The first game in the series is a classic that has stood the test of game and time, and its sequel, Giana Sisters DS, fixes all the problems with the original game and left the series in a great place for a third game, which happened a few years later with Twisted Dreams. Now this newest entry in the series is something familiar, but also something radically different. The reason this game is so fresh and new was because of the financial support of the backers. Thanks to them, Black Forest Games was able to make such a beautiful game. As great as this game was a Kickstarter success, it's also sad that something as original as this game would not have happened in the gaming mainstream, and that's a pretty sad place that gaming is in at the moment. But success stories like Giana Sisters and other self-funded independent games give me hope for the future. If there are ever any more Giana Sister games in the future, I'll be more than happy to review them. Thank you for watching this series review, and I'll see you next time.